My name is Presley Graham, 29 years old, and until that Friday night, I still showed up to family dinners in Greensboro like nothing had changed. We were halfway through Valerie's baked chicken when she set her fork down, smiled sweetly, almost too sweet, and said, "Presley, your brother needs about 400,000 to buy the Porsche he's been eyeing and to put a down payment on that little showroom downtown. It's time the family helps Colton get started the right way." My dad nodded without even looking at me. Colton leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking like the check was already sitting in his hand. I kept eating, didn't say a word, just felt the room shrink around me. The next morning, my phone started blowing up. It wasn't just about the car anymore, they already had papers prepared for me to sign. Papers that would hand over everything I had quietly protected for years. They thought they were about to cash in. They had no idea I had already made sure that money could never leave my name. If you want to read the rest of the story and never miss the next part, hit subscribe right now. This family drama is just getting started. A couple years before that dinner, I was still driving across Greensboro every weekend to check on properties most people wrote off as lost causes. My mom had passed when I was 12, and Dad Douglas Graham remarried Valerie Graham less than a year later. Colton Graham came along soon after. My half-brother, the kid they treated like the second coming. Dad owned a mid-sized construction company that stayed busy enough to keep the lights on, but nothing flashy. Valerie handled the books at home and made sure everyone knew Colton was the future. I paid my own way through UNC Greensboro, graduated with a business degree, and started buying rundown houses nobody else wanted. I'd fix them up, stage them, flip them, and turn five-figure profits before I even hit 25. By 26, I'd saved enough to put offers on bigger deals. Whole blocks in transitioning neighborhoods, old mill houses near downtown, anything with good bones and better potential. That same year, Dad sat me down and told me Grandpa Graham had left a trust, some land on the north side of the city, plus cash, supposedly for the whole family when the time came. He made it sound like we'd all decide together later. I didn't think much of it until I got a letter from the estate attorney. The trust was actually set up in my name alone. 7.8 million total locked until I turned 30 unless I chose to access it earlier for education or housing. Grandpa had done it quietly after Mom died, wanting to make sure I'd never have to depend on anyone. Dad never mentioned that part. I called Sarah Mitchell, a trusts and estates attorney I'd met through a real estate networking group. She reviewed everything, explained that revocable trusts could be changed, and suggested I move the assets into an irrevocable trust immediately if I wanted absolute protection. It took 2 meetings. I signed the papers, transferred every parcel and every dollar, and made myself the sole beneficiary. Once it was done, no one could touch it. Not Dad, not Valerie, not even a court without proving fraud, which didn't exist. Sarah filed everything, sent the confirmations to a post office box I rented under my business name, and that was that. I kept flipping houses, kept stacking money, and never brought it up at family dinners. Wyatt Sullivan came into the picture around then. We met when he was contracting electrical work on one of my renovations. He'd show up early, stay late, and always caught the little details that saved me thousands. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekends, helping each other close deals. He understood numbers the way I did, and he never once asked where my startup capital came from. Meanwhile, Colton spent his early 20s bouncing between community college classes he never finished and jobs that lasted a few months. Valerie bought him a new truck anyway. Dad co-signed loans for tools he barely used. Whenever I came over, the conversation always circled back to how Colton just needed one good opportunity to shine. I'd nod, change the subject, and leave before the guilt trip started. I still helped when they asked for smaller things. 5,000 here for Valerie's dental work, 10 for Colton's certification course he dropped after 2 weeks. It kept the peace. And honestly, the money didn't hurt me. My own portfolio was growing faster than I could spend it. I closed a 6-property deal near Lindley Park that netted almost $1 million after rehab costs bought my first house outright in Fisher Park and still had cash flowing. Dad joked that I was the family's good luck charm. Valerie called me practical. Colton rolled his eyes whenever my name came up. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. They praised my work ethic, but never my success, asked about my weekends, but never invited me to theirs unless they needed something fixed or paid for. I told myself it was just how blended families worked, that blood and marriage mixed messy sometimes. Wyatt saw it clearer. One night after a long closing, he poured us wine on my back porch and said, "They act like your wins are communal property and Colton's losses are your responsibility. Be careful." I laughed it off, but his words stuck. Sarah checked in every year to confirm the irrevocable trust was still ironclad. Interest kept compounding, property values in Greensboro kept climbing, and the total crept past $9 million without me touching a dime. I didn't need it yet. Flipping paid the bills and then some. But I knew one day the other shoe would drop. I just never guessed it would happen over baked chicken on a random Friday night. Back home, the deals kept coming. A local developer I'd worked with before tipped me off about a tired apartment complex off Battleground Avenue. 40 units, outdated everything, perfect location. I negotiated the seller down, locked in private financing, and spent the next 8 months overseeing the overhaul myself. New roofs, new kitchens, new everything. When we relisted the units, the rents doubled overnight and the waiting list filled up in a week. That single project cleared almost $2 million after debt service. Dad heard about it through a mutual contractor friend and called to congratulate me, then casually asked if I could float Colton a loan for a new truck since his old one finally died. I sent $5,000 through Venmo and changed the subject. Valerie started texting more often, pictures of designer purses or spa days with captions about how hard she worked keeping the house running. The hints grew bolder. Colton needed new tires, then certification classes for heavy equipment, then startup money for a pressure washing side gig that never launched. I still showed up for the occasional Sunday barbecue, but the dynamic had shifted in ways they didn't seem to notice. Dad spent half the afternoon bragging about Colton's latest big idea while Valerie refilled his plate before he asked. Whenever I mentioned a closing or a new acquisition, the conversation drifted back to whatever Colton was supposedly working on that month. I stopped correcting them, stopped offering details, just smiled and passed the potato salad. Wyatt came with me a few times and saw it plain as day. On the drive home after one cookout, he shook his head and said they treated me like an ATM with good manners. I told him it wasn't that bad. He didn't push, but he started screening my phone when family numbers popped up and handing it over only when I asked. Sarah sent annual updates confirming the irrevocable trust kept growing, untouched property taxes paid automatically, value climbing with every downtown revitalization announcement. I filed the reports and moved on. The bigger my wins got, the smaller their asks felt, which made it easier to keep the peace. I paid for Colton's truck tires, covered a semester when he decided to try trade school again, even picked up the tab when Valerie wanted family photos done by some expensive studio. They thanked me every time, called me. Generous, told everyone what a good big sister I was. I let them. Money wasn't the issue anymore. Time and energy were. I bought a second home in Irving Park, a 1930s brick Tudor I restored room by room exactly how I wanted it. Wyatt moved in without a big discussion. His toothbrush just showed up one day and never left. We hosted friends through game watch parties, built the kind of life that didn't require anyone else's approval. Dad came by once to see the place, walked through the renovated kitchen, whistled low, and said, Colton would love a house like this someday when he got settled. I poured him coffee and didn't respond. Colton's ideas grew more expensive with every year I stayed quiet. He talked about opening a custom garage, then a food truck, then partnering on a boutique gym. Each plan needed seed money only I seemed able to provide. Valerie started forwarding listings of commercial spaces with heart emojis like I wouldn't notice the price tags. Dad stopped asking outright and just mentioned how tight margins were at the construction company, how one good infusion could let them bid on bigger jobs. I kept my answers short, kept my distance longer between visits, and watched the pattern settle in, like weather nobody wanted to name. One Friday evening, Wyatt was tied up with a commercial wiring job, so I drove to Dad's house alone for what Valerie had called a quick family meal. The table looked different, cloth napkins, the good china candles already lit. Dad greeted me with a tight hug. Valerie poured me wine before I sat down. Colton was in his usual seat, new watch flashing under the light, phone in hand like always. Small talk carried us through the first course. Then Valerie cleared the salad plates and returned with a leather folder. She set it in front of Dad like it was the main dish. Dad opened it, slid a short stack of papers my way, and folded his hands. Inside were withdrawal forms for $400,000 made out to Colton, plus a quitclaim deed that would surrender my entire interest in Grandpa's trust. Gregory Lawson, the family attorney, had already witnessed everything. My signature line waited blank. Valerie smiled the way she did when she thought she'd won. Colton found the perfect Porsche and a showroom space downtown. $400,000 covers the car and the lease deposit. Marcus Ellison said he'd send high-end clients the minute it looks legit. This is Colton's shot, Presley. You've done well. Now it's his turn. Dad didn't even blink. We're all agreed. Sign and we move forward as a family. Colton finally looked up, smirk sharp. Come on, sis. You've got more than enough. Time to share. I flipped through the pages slowly. The withdrawal still referenced the old revocable trust as if the irrevocable transfer 3 years ago didn't exist. The quitclaim tried to give away assets that had been legally untouchable since the day I signed with Sarah. I closed the folder and pushed it back. I'm not signing. Silence hit the table hard. Dad's jaw tightened. What do you mean you're not signing? Valerie leaned forward. We've been patient. You've had full control while Colton's had nothing. This isn't a request. Colton snorted. Figures. Always the selfish one? Dad stood, voice low and final. Then you're choosing money over family. If these papers aren't signed tonight, don't come back. You're out. Valerie added, softer but colder. I raised you better than this. I looked at each of them. Dad red-faced, Valerie clutching her wine stem. Colton already reaching for the folder like it was his, and felt something inside me settle. I'm not the one who forgot what family means, I said, standing up. Enjoy dinner. I walked out, left the wine untouched, and drove home with the windows down and the radio off. The next morning, I blocked every number I had for Dad, Valerie, and Colton turned off red receipts and got back to work like the night before had never happened. Wyatt didn't ask questions. He just made coffee stronger than usual and kissed me on the way out the door. For 8 solid weeks, my phone stayed quiet on their end. I closed 2 more flips, broke ground on a small condo conversion near the Coliseum, and started looking at land outside the city limits, where prices were still reasonable. Life moved forward. Then Gregory Lawson showed up at my office. Unannounced suit, wrinkled tie loose, holding the same leather folder from dinner like it had been burning a hole in his briefcase. He closed the door behind him and got straight to the point. Your father instructed me to file emergency access motions against the original trust. I pulled the records this morning. He opened the folder, slid updated paperwork across my desk, and tapped the irrevocable transfer stamped 3 years earlier. It's ironclad, Presley. Nothing I can do, nothing any judge will do. The assets never belonged to the revocable trust after that date. They're yours alone. I leaned back and waited for the rest. He exhaled hard. Douglas had been using the expected inheritance as collateral for business lines of credit, almost $3 million total. Banks are calling the loans now that the trust can't be touched. If he can't refinance or liquidate something fast, the construction company folds, and the house goes into foreclosure. I nodded once. That's not my problem. Gregory's face tightened. He's your father. He stopped being that the night he told me to choose between money and family, then chose for me. Gregory left 10 minutes later looking 10 years older. That afternoon, Dad tried the house phone, then Wyatt's cell, then showed up at the job site where I was walking a new build with contractors. He pulled me aside near the framing voice, shaking eyes red. You have to fix this, Presley. The banks gave us 30 days. Valerie's beside herself. Colton doesn't even understand what's happening. I kept my hard hat on and my tone flat. You drew up papers to take everything Grandpa left me. You threatened to cut me out if I didn't sign. I'm simply living with the choice you made. He started pleading about family legacy, about second chances, about how they never meant it. I let him talk until the site superintendent walked over and asked if everything was okay. Dad left without another word. 2 days later, Valerie appeared at my front door holding a casserole like nothing had changed. I didn't open the screen. She talked through it about forgiveness and healing, and how Colton was depressed now that the showroom deal fell through. When she finished, I told her the locks had been changed and closed the door. Sarah confirmed everything Gregory said and added that multiple lenders had already filed notices of default against Dad's company and the personal residence. North Carolina foreclosure process moves fast once the clock starts. I thanked her for the update and asked her to keep monitoring in case anyone tried creative lawsuits. She said the chances were 0. By the end of those 8 weeks, the reality had settled in on their side. The big house in Irving Park went on the market with a distressed price. Dad's company trucks started disappearing from job sites as equipment loans got called. Colton's social media went from luxury car posts to long silences. I kept building. A few days after the foreclosure clock started ticking, Dad's truck pulled into my driveway at 7 in the morning, Valerie in the passenger seat clutching a tissue. I watched from the kitchen window as they walked up together slower than I'd ever seen them. Wyatt squeezed my shoulder and went out the back door to give us space. I opened the front door but stayed in the frame. Dad spoke first, voice cracked and quiet. We're losing everything, Presley. The bank scheduled the auction. We have nowhere to go if you don't help. Valerie stepped forward, eyes swollen. We'll sell what we can, downsize whatever it takes. But we need a bridge loan until the dust settles. Even $100,000 buys us time to figure the rest out. Dad nodded fast. Name your interest rate. We'll sign anything. Just keep the roof over our heads. I let them finish. You told me I wasn't welcome unless I handed over what was never yours to begin with. My answer hasn't changed. Valerie dropped to her knees right there on the porch, tears streaming. I'm begging you. Think of your brother. Colton's a mess. He doesn't have a plan without that showroom. Dad tried to pull her up, but she wouldn't move. Please, baby girl. We were wrong. We see that now. From the truck, Colton yelled something about lawsuits and fraud phone already to his ear, like he was calling Gregory mid-sentence. I closed the door, locked it, and turned off the porch light. Later that afternoon, Gregory texted asking for a meeting. I ignored it. Sarah forwarded court filings Colton had apparently convinced someone to draft, claims of undue influence, breach of fiduciary duty, anything that might stick. She added a single line. All dismissed on summary judgment before they even reach a judge. Waste of everyone's time. The auction came and went. A local investor snapped up the Irving Park house for pennies on the dollar. Moving trucks showed up the following week. I drove past once on my way to a closing and saw Valerie loading boxes into a dented SUV while Dad carried out the flat screen like it was the last thing he owned worth keeping. Colton stood on the curb arguing with the driver about space for his golf clubs. They ended up in a 2-bedroom apartment off Randleman Road, the kind of place with coin laundry in the basement and bars on the first-floor windows. Dad's company equipment got repossessed piece by piece until the yard sat empty. Suppliers filed liens. Employees walked off jobs when paychecks bounced. Colton kept posting cryptic stories about betrayal and karma, then deleted them hours later. His girlfriend of 3 years moved out the same week the house sold. Friends stopped returning calls once the free drinks dried up. Valerie tried one last time showing up at my office with a handwritten letter full of apologies and promises. Security walked her out before she reached my floor. Dad sent emails that grew shorter and more defeated each time until they stopped altogether. I never answered a single one. Wyatt and I listed another property that month cleared enough to pay cash for 10 acres on the edge of Summerfield, where we planned to build our own place from the ground up. Contractors broke ground the same week Dad's old office building went dark. Sarah sent the final trust statement value had crossed $10 million with the latest land appraisals. I filed it and scheduled a celebratory dinner with people who had never once asked me to prove my worth. Colton still decided to throw himself a 25th birthday party even with everything falling apart around him. He rented the private room at the country club, sent invitations to every contact he had left, and told everyone it was just a celebration of hitting a new chapter. Dad and Valerie showed up in clothes that looked borrowed, smiling too wide for people who had moved into an apartment 2 weeks earlier. Colton wore a rented tux and kept ordering rounds on a credit card that somehow still worked. Wyatt and I received an invitation in the mail. Thick cardstock gold lettering the works. I almost threw it away, but something made me tuck it into my purse instead. The night of the party, I put on a simple black dress, the one I saved for closings that went better than expected. Wyatt raised an eyebrow when I told him where we were going. He grabbed his keys without a word. We walked in 20 minutes after the toast. Heads turned. Colton spotted me, first champagne glass halfway to his mouth, face cycling through confusion, then panic, then forced excitement. "Presley, you came." He crossed the room, fast arms open like we were long-lost best friends. Dad and Valerie froze near the cake table, color draining from their faces. I waited until he was close enough to hear me clearly over the music. I wouldn't miss it. Colton tried steering me toward a corner, but I stepped around him and headed straight for the small stage where the DJ had set up. I took the microphone before anyone realized what was happening. "Hi, everyone. Most of you know me as Colton's sister. Some of you have done business with my father's construction company or heard about the family trust everyone assumed would save the day. I'm here to clear a few things up." The room went dead quiet. I pulled a slim folder from my clutch. Copies of the irrevocable trust documents, the transfer confirmation, the latest appraisal showing just over $10 million. Sarah had prepared a simple one-page summary on top. I held it up so the front tables could see. This trust was moved into my name alone 3 years ago. It was never community property. It was never collateral for loans. Every attempt to access it, every paper served every threat made. All of it wasted time and money that no longer existed. I looked directly at Dad. His shoulders collapsed like someone had cut invisible strings. Valerie started shaking her head, mouthing no over and over. Colton lunged for the microphone. "This is my birthday." Security appeared before he reached me. Wyatt had already spoken to the manager on the way in. I kept going. "The house is gone. The company is gone. And none of it is coming back. Not from me." A woman near the front gasped. Phones came out. Someone started recording. Dad found his voice. "Presley, please." "Not here." "Here is exactly where it belongs," I said. "In front of the same people you told Colton would be his future clients. In front of the friends who watched you choose one child over the other for years. You wanted an audience. You have one." I set the microphone down, left the folder on the table next to the cake, and walked out with Wyatt's hand steady on my back. Behind us, Valerie started sobbing loud enough to echo down the hallway. Colton shouted my name once, then nothing. 2 months later, Dad filed for divorce. Valerie moved to a studio downtown and took a receptionist job at a dental office. Dad sold his last truck to cover attorney fees and started driving for a rideshare app at night. Colton's girlfriend left the same week the country club video hit local Facebook groups. The invites stopped coming. The custom garage never opened. Last I heard, he was living in a buddy's basement and picking up day labor on construction sites. The same kind of work he used to laugh about. Wyatt and I got married quietly on the beach in Charleston, South Carolina. Just family, who had earned the title, and a handful of friends who never asked for anything but my company. We closed on a house with wide porches and old oaks, the kind of place you build a life instead of a balance sheet. I changed every number, forwarded the old mail to Sarah's office, and never looked back. Sometimes people ask if I feel guilty. I don't. I protected what was legally and morally mine from the moment I saw where the road was heading. They chose the destination the night they slid those papers across the dinner table and told me blood was thicker than everything I'd built on my own. Family isn't a free pass to take what someone else earned. It's a table where everyone brings something or they don't get a seat. I used to think family was forever. Turns out all it took was one dinner to show me who actually deserved a place at mine.